Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, Mindset, Exercise, Nutrition. We are three personal trainers and health coaches dedicated to providing information in these realms to promote critical thinking and assist you in your life practice. My name is Matt Gluckman, and as always with me are my co-hosts, Eric Menchie and Mike Urso. We bring contrasting perspectives and viewpoints on similar topics. We look at the psychology, the science, behavior, and how it can shape your fitness lifestyle. So take a listen as we peel back the onion, fall down the rabbit hole, and we hope we can help guide people along their journey as they continue to strengthen their body, mind, and spirit. And this week we have a special interview with Mike Demille, and I'll let Eric talk more about that.
Yeah, so Mike is a physical therapist, personal trainer, who is also postural restoration certified. So he's gone through the whole process, and that's kind of where our paths crossed. Got to pick his brain and dive into, his realm, and he kind of dove into my realm. So it's going to be a great episode. I'm excited to, sit down and have a chat with him, and excited for you guys to hear this.
Yeah, I can't wait. PRI, Mike, did you ever do that certification?
I did not.
No. Gotcha. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff. I mean, it all blows my mind, but I was never good at the book studies. So I think it would take me like 5 years to get through a 1 year certification. But that's not to be said that that information isn't still extremely valuable, and that's why I love that Eric himself is you're PRI certified, and yeah, it'll be fun to listen to the interview. Do anybody have any news they want to discuss?
Yeah, speaking of diving into research and books that I know you love to do, I found an article online. It says cardio boosts metabolism more than strength training. Study claims it says researchers found that cycling produced much higher levels of metabolic hormone FGF21, which helps in fat oxidation and lipid mobilization in the body. But when you really click on the research and dive into the article itself, it's not really, they did a research of cycling versus 5 sets of 10 on 5 different exercises, and each bring their own set of benefits to the table. And it just happened that the cardio, or you want to say the cycling, produced this level of hormone that didn't drop, where when you had exercise training, it dropped a little bit. And all that FGF is it's a circulating hormone through like the bile of the body. It's like at the end of the day,
And what do you know what the acronym is for? What it stands for?
it's fiber growth factor 21 or something. It's something like that, where it's a metabolic hormone.
So it's just a level of something that they're measuring in the body.
Yeah, it'll be circulating. It's like the FGF hormones.
Is it in the blood?
So it's sort of like think of like almost like a insulin growth factor, but it's not that high up on the importance. But they want to use this to potentially use it as a drug to combat diabetes, obesity, and other metabolic disorders. But interesting, cycling for 1 hour didn't change the levels, but if you ran a marathon, those levels would drop. So don't tell me that cardio is better than weight training, because it all depends on the duration and intensity that you're working at. I just thought you guys would be interested on some.
Oh, so they were able to actually like really kind of pinpoint even further. Like, listen, you need cardio, you need weights. These are the specific hormones that are, um, I guess, stronger when using both.
And it was, it's not like you should do one or the other. It's got to be a balanced routine. It's just saying like, hey, if you do cardio, that will help with this hormone. Also, if you do weight training, it's going to help with these hormones. It's going to be back.
Okay.
But once they're trying to monetize it and make it a drug. So they're going to target these like this hormone that's like going to be like, hey, this is the new great leptin. Like, remember that a couple of years ago when they're like, we're going to market this, and it's, why can't they just be like, how about you try exercise?
Well, it's a very misleading article title, right? What was the title? The title of the article. Yeah, that is extremely blanket term when you say that. And most people, even if they're going to click through and actual click to the study and read it, they're only going to read the abstract, and that doesn't always give you a good kind of citation of what was really going on in the study. So,
Cardio boosts wasn't more than strength training. Just it's a lot of misleading. And then people come back and they're like, I read this and it says this. Like, did you actually read the study? Like the study doesn't really prove anything. It just says this hormone's a little bit higher in this modality of exercise.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that people will come back to you with extreme articles and headlines and stuff like that, because that's sort of like one motivating reason why I wanted to create a podcast. So I was like, I'm tired of having the same conversation with different people, and it would be about like extremes and people doing their research and just not bad research, but just not being critical about it and digging further and taking things for what they were at face value, and just kind of taking something that they read as the be all end all. Like I had a client that was like sent me an article that said red wine could boost your red blood count, and like the article title was like red wine's good for you or something like that. And she like sent me just the link, and she was joking, but she's like, all right, great. Well, looks like I'll be drinking all day and all night now. So it's just kind of funny.
Well, then all of those kind of this bad information turns into the telephone game. I had a client who was basically like, yeah, I had a friend and their trainer had her do keto for 12 weeks and she lost like so much weight and now I'm keto. And I'm like, what? Wait, you're keto now? Like, oh wow, you're keto because your friend got results on keto and great. So all of a sudden, so how many times this happens? So this bad message or this bad article gets passed down, and people accept it and just run with it. And then 12 weeks later, they're like, "Why can I not lose weight? Why am I gaining weight? Actually, what's going on?" It's like, oh,
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. It's like you are your own little universe. You are so different in your bio makeup and your brain wirings and everything that functions, that you just can't take the fact that one thing worked for one other person in one small aspect. You're like taking a sliver and you're extrapolating way too much. But for what it's worth, it seems to be a really common error, and you can't overlook that's human behavior to kind of look at what other people are doing for success stories and try to replicate that in a way. But then you got to then remember that, hey, in the end of the day, we're all still learning. So, you know, just take everything for what it's worth. Try it out and see if it works for you.
What I also found interesting with it, and Matt, you would like this, is in the study they actually said these levels were kind of suppressed or were affected by prolonged fasting. So you have to take into consideration, like, you know,
All the variables, all the confounding variables.
yeah, like so it's just like you can't do cardio. Like this is going to be great. Like it's completely two different metabolic pathways that they were targeting in the study. So it's just kind of you can't read and believe all the like the big flashy stuff. You gotta go read the studies and try to piece it together.
Yeah, and just remember that it's all um, just gotta accept the good with the bad.
But what you should do is definitely do strength training, definitely do some kind of conditioning, and together you're going to be a healthy human being. And don't wait for this FGF 21 drug to hit the markets because it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just stop buying all that crap. You don't need to buy more. You need less. Everyone needs less. No, not everybody. Everyone's success story is different. Everyone's path that they need to find is different. And what might be the contrasting key that someone's missing in their life would be the overdoing it in someone else's life. So it's fun to continue to piece together this big puzzle. But that's where I find enjoyment out of every day. Is that it's not like rudimentary. I'm not sitting on an assembly line like hammering the same nail and just waiting for the next one to come up. You know what I mean? So that's what keeps this industry a lot more fun for me. But it definitely was Urso who I heard when I heard that quote of just like reestablish contrast in your life. And what were we talking about? I want to say it was energy systems, or
It was homeostasis.
it was homeostasis. You're right. You're right. And it was so true. You got to reestablish that contrast in your life. And for better or for worse, I broke my thumb and I broke my finger, and I've had to run. I've had to do yoga. I've had to step away from weights, and it's been great. It's been great.
You make me sick.
Yeah, and yeah, homeostasis. I just thought of a visual representation of that contrast is literally a weighing scale, like a scale that has that teetering effect, and you need to have equal amounts for it to be balanced out on either side. So, like if you drop too much of something onto your body, you're gonna have this dramatic effect. You have to give it the complete opposite in order to rebalance it out, like the same amount of the complete opposite, you know. And
Look at you, and you told me that I'm the analogy king. Look at you. Look at you. Yeah, that was great. I could see it. I can still see it. I'll remember it now better.
But that's contrast, right? That's like, if it's gonna what is it? It's about to become September in New England for you. I don't know what's like out there in Utah, Matt, but out here, Menchie and I are, yeah, it's a beautiful season, but we know that winter is upon us in New England, and it's going to be blistering cold very soon. So you kind of have to, and some people, they don't have that contrast. I like the contrast of the hot and the cold. Like you get it dramatically. It's Eric, it's about to be what, 97, 98 tomorrow and Wednesday. I think we're getting, yeah, 10 degrees hotter than it was today, and 88 was hot. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be almost 100 tomorrow.
Are you serious? What? It's like only 88 over here. So what? At what time? Like what? What are the peak hours over there? Because the peak hot hours here is like 5 o'clock.
It's like around 2, I think.
Okay. So yeah, it'll be 75 degrees at the height of the day tomorrow here.
Yeah, but if you came back here and we went for a run in this humidity, oh man, would you be addicted?
I love it, man. It's the no the lack of the moisture in the air really plays a big difference in the climate and the culture. Oh, I'd pass out. Nope, definitely would not be. Definitely would not be.
Are you at altitude at all there, Matt? Are you at altitude?
Um, that's a great question. I don't know what current altitude I'm at right now. What's your current altitude? You guys are pretty low in the East Coast. Yeah. What do you know the highest point in Boston proper?
I don't know. So Mansfield, where I live, is 160 feet above sea level. What's your town, Matt?
So I'm looking up right now, but the highest elevation in Delaware, where I'm from, is 472 square feet, and where I'm at right now, I have about 4,000 feet above sea level.
Yeah, yeah. You'd come here, man, and you'd smoke us in a run right now. Salt Lake City is 4,200 feet. Wow.
I don't know though. You'd be surprised, like the humidity, the moisture, the way that my body would have to dissipate that heat. It'd be a little different. It really would. Yeah, it would be interesting. It would definitely be interesting. Um, but I will tell you that if we did any like bowling or darts, you'd have to go left-handed because of my handicap at this point. And I'm pretty good now. I'm pretty good with my left for most stuff.
You know what I always wondered too? This is interesting. A lot of times, with people who are ambidextrous, like naturally left-handed people, can do right-handed things really well, but people who are naturally right-handed can't do left-handed things very well. Right? Is that common? Like, at least with the people I know.
Yeah, yeah. My hardest part is torquing through my core. Like I can twist, I can step, I can bowl, I can throw, I can do all this stuff. But the moment I take like a football, for example, and I have to, yeah, it's like my arm, and I've kind of pinpointed it where my you know what my theory is that my left arm doesn't sit in the scapula as healthily as my right side, so I have to really focus on my lat and squeeze my lat to really throw a football. So like arm bars, because when I was really in the gym and I was doing arm bars just really from more so for my left side, um, as warm up, and it made a huge difference. But you know, yeah, I just noticed that when I try to throw, it's like I can't connect through the floor. I can't turn that oblique on and twist through. So it's kind of funny.
Well, also you play still playing soccer, right?
Yeah, but I'm doing more with my left foot, like on purpose.
I mean, but you played right, but you played soccer most of your life, right? So you think about your training, that whole like kind of loading that right side sling pattern, like that, rotary to that. You're snapping your right hip around and whacking that ball. Like you're doing that right rotation in such a high velocity over and over for years and years. You're developing that rotational sling in your body. I think it has more to do with that deep kind of core musculature in that spiral line. You know what I mean? And being able to produce energy, through your body in that spiral line.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't really at all ever concerned with using my left foot when I was in high school and stuff because I was just trying to put my best foot forward. Ha, pun intended. But but I was no, wasn't I was never really good with my left, and I was a defender, so I never really had to be right. Like I was the last line of defense. I was just basically a body that was knocking people down or cutting people off or clearing a ball. But then I was always good at clearing with my left, but I could never be accurate with like a lower intensity like pass or shot even. So I started practicing that and just even practicing juggling more and getting more touches with my left side and getting more comfortable with that left side, and it really made a huge difference even in just the way that I play these pickup games, and it's fun. And you're absolutely right, because I can still even notice that, yeah, you're right, like I've had so many hours my right side torquing through that it's so natural, and I'm just so thrown off that like my left doesn't feel that natural yet, even with kicking. So it,
Your brain can't even figure that out, like that movement. No way. But I think that's why like ambidextrous people or left-handed people, they can do right-handed stuff easier because more humans are right side dominant. So they come back and they're like, hey, I can efficiently throw or do stuff on my right side.
yeah, yeah, exactly, so you have to slow it down. Exactly. Well, you were so right onto something when you were saying how um what was it? The lobe, you have three lobes of the lung on the right and two on the left, and your right side diaphragm is larger than the diaphragm on your left side, or the opening at least, or whatever. And that just so clicks in my head like, oh duh, because there's deep um sort of subconscious processes going on that are more strongly identified to the right side of the body for whatever reason, and it's pretty.
Yeah. You want to hear another crazy one?
Weird. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll wrap it up here. So if you look at the heart, if you cut someone's like head off and look down through the heart is tilted towards the right. And if you look at the rate of how blood comes out, it comes out and back towards the right and then down through the body. And I'm not saying it plays a part, but I've heard like, and like your electrical pulse goes left down across the heart and you're coming back to the right. Each beat of the heart, if it's pushing back towards the right, is it going to drive people to be more right sided? And that's just human. It's like that's how we're built. And I found that very interesting. Like from an innate, like when we're developing as young, embryos, like a heart is beating in a certain way, pushing us in a direction when we're not even facing gravity yet. Just thought to think on.
That's interesting. Yeah. Food for thought. Well, on that mental fuck for all our listeners out there, I hope you enjoy the Mike Demille interview. And we will see you next week with energy systems.
And we are back with the Think Fitness Life podcast. And on today's episode, I'm very excited to have a good friend of mine on the show and a very knowledgeable individual. I've had the opportunity to work with this individual and learn immensely from him. He's a physical therapist and a strength coach. He graduated from Springfield College with a doctorate in physical therapy. Has worked with collegiate and professional baseball players as well as the general population. And his passion to grow as a coach is what really kind of led us to our paths crossing with the Postural Restoration Institute, where he is postural restoration certified, and he uses that techniques day in and day out to help his clients. With this skill set and knowledge, he provides manual therapy, corrective exercise, neuromuscular re-education, and capacity training while recognizing the natural asymmetries of the human body to provide a custom plan of care and optimize results to his clients. And I'm welcome to have Mike DeMille on the show. Welcome, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I've listened to a number of podcasts for years. It was one of the things that got me so interested in the whole continuing education aspect of our profession, but I never been on one. So this is my debut. So I'm pumped up.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to bring you on and basically get people to know what you do, who you are, and how you use some of these certifications that you have, because a lot of people haven't really heard of these things and don't understand what they are.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny. I don't think my story is as cool as a lot of other people's stories that I've heard, but I've been a baseball player all my life, especially when I was young. I was on one of those teams where you would pitch an entire game as a little leaguer, and then you would go to the outfield for the second game of the doubleheader, and then you'd come into the second game and then close. So I think when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I just had what you would call like a typical overuse arm injury. And that was my first exposure to PT. And then I think after going through the routine that they gave me, which looking back on it now is whatever, very orthopedic in nature, but I think my diligence with the routine and my interest in the rehab and self improvement process is kind of what led my parents to suggest that going into physical therapy in college would be for me. So when I was a freshman at Springfield, so at Springfield, you can decide to do the 3+3, which a lot of schools do now. So 3 years of undergrad and then grad, and you can be accepted into that before freshman year. So I went into Springfield as a freshman, as a baseball player, undergrad PT student. And then the guy that really changed things for me, who I met, who was the strength conditioning coach, a graduate student and an athletic training student, and the athletic trainer for the baseball team was Sam Sturgis, who I work with now. And I would say if it wasn't for Sam, I wouldn't have been exposed to a lot of the opportunities that I've had, like PRI, for example. And I may or may not have had the drive to continue to be as passionate about my job as I am. So I owe a lot of where I am today to Sam. So basically, what happened was freshman PT student, I start hanging out with Sam. Sam graduates because he was in his second year of grad school. And then he goes to work at Pure Performance in Needham, which was in a different location than it is from now at the time. But he says, and this is when I go into sophomore year, he says, why don't you continue to train with me? Because Needham is like 20 minutes from where I grew up in Milton. So on summer break or winter break, I would go in and train with Sam. I would learn a little bit about what he was doing because I was kind of learning the same things in class. Like I'd be taking basic anatomy and he would go to a PRI course and we would kind of talk about where those things met in the middle. And every time he would go to a course, like I remember the 2014 Boston Sports Medicine Group at Northeastern was a big one. That was a game changer for me. He would invite me to go with him. So I would go with him and the rest of the guys at Pure. And while I was learning the classical things that I needed to pass the board exam in physical therapy school, I would also be learning some of these continuing education things that those guys were doing too. So that continued to fuel the fire while I was in school. And then I graduated school and I was I was a shoo-in for a PT at Pure Performance because they had known me for like 5 years at that point. And now a year later, I've been with them for the past year. I've been able to do a lot of the things that I've always wanted to do from getting opportunities from them because they knew my interests, like PRI, for example. And that's why I got the PRC, and that's why I did the Costa Rica trip, which I just got back from. So it's been a really exciting year, and it's been a really fun journey. And I've had a lot of help from a lot of people along the way.
So, I mean, I guess the big thing to start is kind of what brought you to this industry of the health and wellness.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny. I don't think my story is as cool as a lot of other people's stories that I've heard, but I've been a baseball player all my life, especially when I was young. I was on one of those teams where you would pitch an entire game as a little leaguer, and then you would go to the outfield for the second game of the doubleheader, and then you'd come into the second game and then close. So I think when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I just had what you would call like a typical overuse arm injury. And that was my first exposure to PT. And then I think after going through the routine that they gave me, which looking back on it now is whatever, very orthopedic in nature, but I think my diligence with the routine and my interest in the rehab and self improvement process is kind of what led my parents to suggest that going into physical therapy in college would be for me. So when I was a freshman at Springfield, so at Springfield, you can decide to do the 3+3, which a lot of schools do now. So 3 years of undergrad and then grad, and you can be accepted into that before freshman year. So I went into Springfield as a freshman, as a baseball player, undergrad PT student. And then the guy that really changed things for me, who I met, who was the strength conditioning coach, a graduate student and an athletic training student, and the athletic trainer for the baseball team was Sam Sturgis, who I work with now. And I would say if it wasn't for Sam, I wouldn't have been exposed to a lot of the opportunities that I've had, like PRI, for example. And I may or may not have had the drive to continue to be as passionate about my job as I am. So I owe a lot of where I am today to Sam. So basically what happened was freshman PT student, I start hanging out with Sam. Sam graduates because he was in his second year of grad school. And then he goes to work at Pure Performance in Needham, which was in a different location than it is from now at the time. But he says, and this is when I go into sophomore year, he says, why don't you continue to train with me? Because Needham is like 20 minutes from where I grew up in Milton. So on summer break or winter break, I would go in and train with Sam. I would learn a little bit about what he was doing because I was kind of learning the same things in class. Like I'd be taking basic anatomy and he would go to a PRI course and we would kind of talk about where those things met in the middle. And every time he would go to a course, like I remember the 2014 Boston Sports Medicine Group at Northeastern was a big one. That was a game changer for me. He would invite me to go with him. So I would go with him and the rest of the guys at Pure. And while I was learning the classical things that I needed to pass the board exam in physical therapy school, I would also be learning some of these continuing education things that those guys were doing too. So that continued to fuel the fire while I was in school. And then I graduated school and I was a shoo-in for a PT at Pure Performance because they had known me for like 5 years at that point. And now a year later, I've been with them for the past year. I've been able to do a lot of the things that I've always wanted to do from getting opportunities from them because they knew my interests, like PRI, for example. And that's why I got the PRC. And that's why I did the Costa Rica trip, which I just got back from. So it's been a really exciting year and it's been a really fun journey. And I've had a lot of help from a lot of people along the way.
That's awesome, man. I didn't realize you and Sam were go that far back. That's great.
We go way back.
Yeah. Now, was he getting his master's in strength and conditioning there or athletic training?
So from what I understand, he got his undergrad in athletic training at Quinnipiac. And then when he came to Springfield, so you can be like I think it's a grad assistant at Springfield as a strength coach, and then they give you a team, and then you to run the programming for. And then you can also be an athletic training student. I think Sam is one of the few to do both at the same time. So he would be in the athletic training room and he would be a strength coach. Usually teams have one of each, but for our team, he was the same person. So it couldn't have fit more perfect with what I do now. It's because it's exactly what he was doing then. And I didn't even realize that part of the profession existed until he showed it to me.
Okay. And so he kind of introduced you to the whole PRI thing.
Yeah, I can remember. So I think the first course he went to was because of Eric Cressy, because he was an intern at Eric's place before he worked at Pure Performance. And then he went to a course. I think this was right around the time that Mike Serrani came to Pure Performance. And the owner, Adam, was going with them as well. So basically, I would come to Pure when Sam was no longer there, and I would just be training on like my winter break from college, getting ready for the upcoming baseball season. And Sam would just try all of the new like manual techniques or whatever he was learning on me. We would chat about it a little bit. And for a while, it was like this far off mystical thing of like, Sam's so cool. I can't believe all this stuff that he's learning. I want to be like Sam when I grow up. And then now I work alongside Sam, and like we have clients back and forth, and it's been a really cool experience to see all that come full circle.
Now, when you were training with him, when the techniques he was doing, was that like completely different than, say, physical therapy you've done before? And did you feel that it really helped you as like a baseball player?
Yeah. Funny thing. So I'd say like the bits and pieces explanation of PRI that I got, which I guess is how most people learn. I can think of like being in a baseball game and doing the warm up before and being like this aggressively rounded out rectus abdominis all fours position and like blowing out as hard as I could until I couldn't feel my abs anymore because they were on so much. And like as you go through and you make mistakes like that and you start to learn more and more about it, you figure out the details of how it works. But I think any any type of effect that I got from it then might have been more placebo than not. Thinking back to like some of the things that we did, and the thoughts were more radical at first, meaning like nobody understands what we're doing. We're doing all this cool new stuff, and I've evolved to have a better appreciation of it as I've learned more about it, and obviously learned more about some of the different orthopedic physical therapy avenues that there are too. But I would say back then it was definitely like we thought we were the cool kids in class that were learning all these things that nobody else knew.
Yeah. And for the people listening, let's kind of dive in. What kind of is PRI for people who may have never heard of it or don't know what it is, and kind of like the background of the certification?
Okay, yeah, sure. So PRI is, I would just say it's a science that takes into account not only the normal asymmetries that we have in the human body, so heart on one side, liver on the other side, asymmetrical diaphragm, asymmetrical breathing, either for right-handers or left-handers, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And then it also, on a deeper level, takes into account the asymmetries of all bodily systems, meaning like cardiovascular, lymphatic, neurological for sure, and then deciding how those patterns of asymmetry may or may not affect the autonomic nervous system, meaning I'm patterning myself to the point where I'm not functioning optimally. And really, the science of PRI is trying to manage those asymmetries and have us exist in patterns that are both helpful for our health and occasionally helpful for our performance. And the way I got exposed to the certification, so it was kind of like a weird haphazard route. I think I took so at the BSMPG, James Anderson was there, and he gave a big talk about just like a general overview of PRI. And then I think I took one of the home study courses when I was maybe a junior, and it was probably myokin or respiration. And I didn't take my first in-person course until I think I took it at Pure Performance, actually, maybe 3 years ago. Jesse Ham taught myokin, and I was there with a bunch of my buddies. But most of my education through it, which some of the people in the certification might not usually do, is we had like so me and some guys in my PT class and the class above me. So Adam Wayakana, who's with the Hawks now, Tyler Tanaka, who works at a couple of facilities over from me in Wellesley. Mike Coyne was in that group. He works at Mass Sport and Spine. There was a number of us that had like this underground Facebook group of continuing education that we would be learning or going to or talking about. So like we would learn the regular stuff in class, and then we would go to this Facebook group at night, and like occasionally we would meet like once a week. And we would talk about all of the things that we weren't learning in class that we thought were a lot more, I guess, interesting and gripping. And it helped us push each other through a lot of the rigors that is PT school. So I did that for a while. And then after I graduated, I probably took more of the formal coursework, like the three primary courses, which are myokin, respiration, and pelvis. And then I took the cervical revolution course at one point. I took impingement and instability. I took the fitness course recently. And when I met all of the requirements for what you need to sit for the certification, I started writing that application. And I wrote it. I couldn't wait to write it. I think it was like the day after I took my board exam. So that was this past summer. I looked up what the qualifications were. I met everything that I needed to meet. And then I started writing that thing right away and sent it in as quick as I could, and then found out that I was accepted to sit for the certification process. And then I did that this past December, which was really incredible. I think most people wait a few years to sit for that certification, but since I had been doing it since undergrad, I couldn't wait to get that thing started.
Yeah, and it's for that certification, it's just for physical therapists, or is it for athletic trainers too?
Yeah, so they have two different kinds of certifications in PRI. There's the PRC, which I believe is for physical therapists and chiropractors, and then they have PR. Sorry, I can't remember.
I think chiropractors might be right on that with the physical therapist.
I think it's those two, and I believe it has to do with the licensure, which would allow people to either put their hands on someone for treatment purposes or not. Which brings up the other certification, which is postural restoration trained, which is athletic trainers, strength conditioning coaches, personal trainers, and so on. So they have two separate certifications, and I think the courses that you need to get into each one are slightly different. But I've talked to a lot of people that have both, and it's the same science, but those are the two certifications that they have.
Yeah, just a little different between like manual and non-manual. Um, but it's still a great educational tool for a lot of people. And I know for you that the way you kind of structure your physical therapy, it's not like the old school, that everyone kind of goes in, get some exercise, go home. You take a whole different approach to physical therapy. Kind of just walk us through how you approach physical therapy a little bit different than maybe just your average physical therapist from like 10 years ago.
Yeah, sure. And this actually has a lot to do with why I ended up going after the job at Pure Performance and not at another clinic. When I think it was right before grad school, on the summers, I would be one of the PT aides, which is usually a college student that helps you with your exercise program at a bigger, more, I guess, classical clinic that you see. So the way those are set up is your physical therapist, you have a patient come in basically every 15 minutes to a half hour. You check in with them, you get all your objective measures that you need, like what their pain is on 0 to 10, what some strength numbers are, you do any manual therapy that you need to do, and then at least at this place, and then you pass them off to the physical therapy aide, who was me at the time, and the physical therapy aide is given an exercise sheet and a prescription of what this patient needs to do. They do their exercises, and then they go home. And my experience there, which worked for plenty of people, but I can specifically remember a number of patients telling me and just getting the impression that the model of seeing more patients, and one lady described it as a factory, just wasn't getting people the results that they were looking for exactly. And I think it's kind of an interesting way to look at pain as a nuisance that comes up, and then something that you have to deal with, and then something that hopefully never comes back because you dealt with it. Not to mention, if some of the modalities to get rid of that pain include more pain, and they don't talk about why your body and your brain was sensing this input in the first place, then it just becomes a totally different conversation. So when I started at Pure, the idea was to kind of flip that model on its head, and more people are doing this now. But seeing patients for an entire hour, completely listening to the details of their story, both from an orthopedic level and potentially a neurological level and other systems level, and finding out exactly what the thing is that has put the system at dis-ease and dysfunction, and then attacking that exact thing that they need help with, and then helping them live the rest of their life both healthfully and well. And that could deal with a regular exercise routine, that can occasionally deal with manual therapy. It can deal with nutrition. It can deal with referring out to a psychologist. It can deal with any number of things. But I think the mission of a place like Pure Performance is to guide people into understanding and controlling their own health better than they otherwise would have, as opposed to being a place where you come and fix someone's nuisance to make it a smaller part of their life.
Yeah, like the old just we'll work on this body part and make it feel better, and then you're kind of out the door.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it works for some people, and I don't want to discount that regular orthopedic injuries don't happen. I don't want to get too woo woo in the brain and pain science land because I know that's totally a risk that therapists like me run. But at the same time, I haven't really met any patient all the way from the post-operative baseball player to the 50-year-old chronic pain mother that lives at home that doesn't deal with issues on a nervous system level. If you know anybody like that, you can tell me, but I haven't met anybody like that yet.
Me either. I agree. I think it's a big driver, and I know you've been doing a lot of like research into this pain and the nervous system, and you just did a talk out in Nebraska on it. I want to kind of dive in on kind of what you did your presentation on and what drew you to that kind of field of research rather than like, oh, well, look at like muscle physiology. Like you went straight up to the brain.
Yeah, sure. And it's funny. I use some of my patients as an excuse to learn about things that I've always wanted to learn about, and I help them along the way, and that's good too. So I had a patient back in October that I saw who had been through 5 years of physical therapy, and the physical therapy seemed to be it was always going after the same thing. This was someone with a knee issue, and there was a lot of quad strengthening, there was a lot of VMO strengthening, there was a lot of hip stretching, there was a lot of electric stim, things along those lines. And I could tell that this person in this nervous system was at a point where there was an inability to manage the things that were going on with their body. For a little background, this was a CrossFit athlete for a number of years, and someone that had been taught to and that had been practicing pushing through pain in a way where their body's relationship with pain and their body's relationship with the sympathetic nervous system was kind of out of whack, meaning I can't recognize when I'm stressed out and I can't recognize when I'm supposed to be relaxed. And it took me a little while to figure out exactly what was going on. So I can send anyone the presentation that wants it too. Just send me an email or whatever. But the after all of that physical therapy happened, she came to me, and of course, I started doing some of the PRI treatment because my test showed me that this was very much a good candidate for some asymmetrical breath work. So I started to do that, and the response wasn't exactly what I would typically see with the exercises that I gave based on the presentation that I saw. So I had to start thinking deeper into the level of why exactly could this be happening? Is there other things that we haven't looked at that we should? And then that's where like a lot of the Lorimer Mosley, David Butler work stemmed from. We actually went out to kind of the holy grail of PRI, which is their Prime program, which deals with getting potentially corrective lenses to alter perception, to get them out splint. So we went as about as deep as the rabbit hole goes, and we looked at all these different factors that can potentially affect the system, and we were trying to figure out why all of the interventions in the past led to no results, and how can we start to create results. So I go through the details of it in that presentation and kind of the timeline of the treatment that we did. The good news is this person is doing a lot better now, and I would say thriving a lot better than when I met her, and starting to figure things out about her own body that she otherwise wouldn't, unless we did everything on the PRI side of things that we did, everything that we did on the pain science side of things that we did. And it's made me think a lot about. So I've had a number of patients ask me if all of the education that I give them, whether that be about their diaphragm, whether that be about their threat detection system of, I don't want to learn about any of this. I don't want to be a student of any of this. Is it even important for me to know? I just want to get better. And my response to that is now always yes. I mean, there's a baseline amount of things that I'd like you to know, because my goal is to have you be a patient for as little time as possible, which is why I love being a strength coach too, because like I'd rather us just work on improving your performance, not trying to fix your health. And it makes me think a lot about how people identify in a certain respect to their injury, and it becomes a part of them. And through strength training, you can almost figure out a new part of you that has nothing to do with dis-ease and has everything to do with health and wellness. So it was an interesting journey. And if anything, it taught me how people with chronic pain think about themselves and how they think about the pain that they have and how they think about how that pain could improve and figuring out the details of that. So it was a really interesting experience. And like I said, anybody that wants to see the presentation, I'd love to send it along.
Yeah, and it was a very good presentation, and I think it's very key to have the PT side, but also, like you said, you kind of sprinkle in, or maybe not more, I should say sprinkle in, but like you get people to a strength program. And I don't think a lot of people realize that when they go to PT. So that's where what you guys do at Pure is a little bit different than your traditional like PT clinic where it's just PT. Kind of elaborate on like how you go through a program when someone wants to see you for PT, and then all of a sudden, before they know it, they're up and doing a strength program, and they're like moving around, they're functioning, and it's good.
Well, what's funny is like I still don't know what the actual criteria or cutoff should be for when someone starts with a physical therapist versus a strength conditioning coach. Like, do you have objective tests that you use? Is it based on pain? Is it based on the patient's history? Like, how do we figure out exactly who they're supposed to see first? Meaning, if every strength coach who had someone who started to experience pain just refer them out to a physical therapist immediately, then no one would ever be with a strength coach. So I think you have to have a keen understanding of both how pain science works and how the individual responds to certain stimuli to be able to understand what variables are appropriate for them. Meaning,
So it's going to be, it's person to person, it's going to be a different timeline. Like not everyone's going to be the same.
yeah, and here's the reality, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers too bad by saying this, but I've seen a lot of physical therapists that are a lot better at strength conditioning than strength coaches, and I've seen a lot of strength coaches that are a lot better at physical therapy than physical therapists. So I always I think Happy Gilmore said it best: gold jacket, green jacket, who gives a shit? It doesn't really matter what certifications or degrees that we have. It matters that we have the knowledge and that we have the understanding and the pliability to help the person that's in front of us. And that's something I feel very strongly about. So for me, it's almost like we remove the veil of what rehabilitation is supposed to be. Obviously, barring things like, I don't know, total knee replacement rehab. But when we're talking about someone with an ache or a pain or a chronic situation, we remove the veil of rehabilitation and then we just see this person for who they are, and we think about the modalities as different methods to improve the situation that they're in. And to me, it doesn't matter necessarily if they're doing PT or if they're doing strength training. And if you're someone that works with me, you won't necessarily recognize when the difference takes place, meaning you won't know exactly when you cross over the threshold. Let's say, for example, where we're working on PRI and we're doing a 90-90 hemi bridge. We're working on the left hamstring and we're working on alternating movement, reciprocal movement. And then the next visit, we're doing a medicine ball throw, and you're feeling your left hamstring in a split squat position. And we're really doing the same exercise that we were doing before, but we've inverted you. And now we're exposing those tissues to a little more load to get them to recover to a stimulus to grow themselves back a little more resiliently. We just went into strength training, and the people don't even realize what the difference is. So I had a guy today who was seeing me for low back pain and had done training with me before. And we essentially went to a kettlebell deadlift and talked a lot about hip and lumbar spine mechanics. And the heavier we got on the deadlift, the better this guy's low back felt. So that's a perfect example of, is that physical therapy? Is that strength training? I don't know what it is, but I'm really glad that guy's back feels better.
Yeah, that's like, and it's always hard to know exactly when that transition is going to be. But I think, like you said, we're always in our programs, we're always training some sort of we're training muscles to act in the right way. So in some way, it's like physical therapy for the person who doesn't realize that they're out of position in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And people don't even know what these positions are. And it's funny. I've seen Pat Davidson probably present like 4 or 5 times this year. It's been a big year of Pat for me. And he said something about how a strength conditioning coach needs to understand how to coach sagittal plane bilateral stance exercises over and over and over again and get so good at that one skill because they're going to be using it so much. And at the same time, the rehabilitation professional needs to get so good at explaining sagittal plane repositioning exercises over and over and over again because they're going to be doing it so much. And I think that reigns true because you see so many people with a typical pattern before, and the solution seems so foreign to them, and it starts to have reproducible results which are evidence based at the moment. Now, if you've looked at any of the recent research that PRI has done in terms of changing immediate outcomes, that it becomes one of the first things that you go to, and then it creates a language with a strength coach who's on the same page that speaks that same language. Now you have a model that you all can use, and then you're seeing people from the beginning to the end of their kind of health history, and it's really conducive to a full result, which I love about working at the place that I work at.
Along the lines of that, just kind of go for the listeners who might not be versed in PRI in all these techniques, but how do you kind of implement your knowledge of PRI and all the stuff you've been researching, the pain science, into your programs and trainings? We don't have to go crazy in depth, but just kind of give like a gist of how you use that stuff to kind of shape on who you are as a coach.
So we have two in my office that I share with a few coaches and therapists. There's a few different graphs on the whiteboard, and one of the graphs has to do with the set point that if you go high enough on the graph, you start to experience pain. And there's a number of things we can do to alter that set point to get you out of pain. One of those things we can do is a recovery based intervention. And I would put something like breathing, stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, manual therapy, meditation, joint mobilization, whatever it is, in that recovery based intervention. And we're going to lower your current point below your threshold of pain, and then you would be out of pain. And that's great. And then we have a graph next to that that is a performance based intervention in a resiliency building intervention. And this is someone that is below their threshold of pain, but now we're going to stress the body purposefully to raise what their old threshold was to a higher threshold. So when people see me, it's almost like I'm setting the stage for strength conditioning on visit one, saying, I'm going to do things to get you below your current threshold of pain, which you are over. That's why you're experiencing pain. But then once you're below that, the work has just started. It's not done because we need to do all of this resiliency work to increase what your current threshold is so that it is harder for you to have pain again. We're making you into a more resilient beast than when you came in as someone who had pain. So really, it's like when you used to have physical therapy goals and you would write it in your documentation, it's now you are creating the goal for this person if they don't have any specific event in mind, of course. And that new goal is being more resilient and being able to face the rigors of life's challenges and making yourself more resistant when it comes to pain, making yourself more resilient, like I said.
So you categorize most people with these different, I wouldn't call them tiers, but levels of kind of like goal based of what you kind of as coach want them to get to be able to thrive in this world that we live in. Say you're at level or graph one, do you proceed up to eventually, hey, I want to get you level 3, like you should be optimal at most things?
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously, it's going to come down to someone's goals. The best place that I've seen this described, and if anybody wants to go to who's listening, is the PRI fitness course. They have a manual. I think Louise Kelly and Julie Blandon and James Anderson spent a lot of time writing the differences between health, performance, and then sport specific activity. So when we're dealing with health, it's going to be a lot of those recovery based interventions, keeping the system balanced, impacting the parasympathetic nervous system as a primary means of the treatment. We have performance, which could be getting stronger in the gym to make your threshold higher. could be an aesthetic goal, could be a strength goal, whatever it is. It has to do with lifting weights. And then you have this sports specific, or I think it's activity specific, whatever they call it, this third realm that has to do with specific things that the person wants to do. And this is obviously going to encompass all athletes, anybody who runs a marathon, anybody that does a Tough Mudder, whatever their goal might be. And the explanation has to be, okay, we can chase this sports specific kind of performance based goal, but you have to recognize that somewhere along the lines of specificity, we may or may not have an impact in your overall health. So in other words, I like to think of it as a bank account. Anytime we do aggressive physical activity or something that could be damaging to us, so if we don't take care of our health well, you're taking money out of the bank account. Anytime you do a recovery based intervention, you're putting money into the bank account. And a couple of things happen with the bank account analogy. You don't want to go bankrupt, obviously, because you have pain, but you don't want to just put money into your bank account all the time and save for something that never comes. If you don't spend any money in your bank account ever, you're probably pretty boring and you probably never have any fun. You probably don't have any friends. You don't want to be that person either. You have to be somebody who takes advantage of all of the performance things that we can do in life. And that probably includes some extension and some non-healthy behaviors. But you want to do it in a smart way where you're adding to the health side of things so that you avoid injury.
I think that's a great analogy. And especially, I think a lot of people tend to, that I've experienced, live on this performance side, and they ramp that up, and their main focus is that, where you got to look at a whole other side of the health and recovery side. Most people aren't doing that, so they're trying to get a physiological effect from the body, but it's just not happening because they're not seeing that other side give.
Yeah. And I've started to get more purposeful with how I interact with people, because I'll tell you, one of the hardest things is when you've gotten as cortical as you can from a neurological standpoint, meaning you're using conscious thought to think about one's body, meaning put your left knee here, squeeze it into the ball, feel your left groin, exhale out all the way, think about where your back is in space. While you're doing these health-based interventions, a lot of that behavior has to go away when you go to performance-based interventions. Meaning, if I'm doing a 2 times body weight deadlift and I'm thinking about the position of my pelvis, I've just misunderstood all of the context of that task, and I might be at an increased risk for hurting myself. So I often tell people that I want you to turn into 2 different human beings when you see me. You have to be able to rest, recover, and rotate and be this health-based person. But depending on your goals, you might have to be this sagittal plane extended beast that doesn't think about their body and turns into this performance-based person. And I think trying to dose which one of those everybody needs is based on the individual and their goals. But I've changed some behaviors with if I take someone from rehab and now we're doing performance training, I'll change some of my behaviors, like cueing less or changing from internal to external cues. A lot of times I'll stand behind the person so they're not looking at me for any type of feedback. They're just training hard and getting after it. And I'm still kind of wrestling and tinkering with things like that to try to improve the outcomes of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's the from what I've seen now is like a really good way to approach training, because a lot of times I think people, and I think it's individualized, people look for coaches like us to give them feedback, like if they're doing it right, rather than like, no, did it feel right? What did you feel? And I also think this could probably be an individual thing. Like you've probably seen some people feel like they need more external cues and just like they want them to be fed. And it's like, well, after a while, I want you to be able to find everything without me saying a word. If I just say a position, you should just get into it.
Exactly.
So I think definitely a great way to approach training in that sense. And once you get up to we'll call it like the phase 3 people, are they high performance people? Are programs where they're ramping up intensity, doing a lot of conditioning and all that stuff, and then some recovery stuff sprinkled in, or how does that work when they get up to that optimal level?
All right. I like the question, and I think it takes into account a number of things that I think about all the time. And I'll start with the whole idea of our business being a cash-based physical therapy business, because I think it's important with the level of commitment that people are willing to give. And I'll describe my ideal client. The ideal client is someone who may or may not have the best financial resources in the world, but sees the service as so valuable that they are willing to spend a big chunk of their hard earned money to improve their health. And they may or may not have a job that is related to health. So, for example, I have one specific guy in mind who works in finance and recently has had some job changes, but has stuck around because working out and feeling empowered and going through a chronic pain situation and coming out on the other side has been one of the most impactful scenarios in his life, and he really values the process that he went through to get through that, kind of beyond just going to the gym and getting in a good workout or just going to a PT and getting out of pain. So someone like this, they come in for a while. Let's say it takes them a month to completely get out of pain and be ready to train. Then they train for a little while and they start to feel strong, and they realize that they can continue to dip into this well to get new self-confidence that they didn't otherwise have. So what I do with someone who's at this phase 3 like you described that has ownership over these two different people is I take them on a new journey. And honestly, the Mass and the Mass 2 books are completely perfect for that. So like this guy that I'm talking about, I sent him a PDF of Mass 2 and I said, "Hey man, I know how much you like this stuff. Read every page of this thing and tell me that you're not ready to run through the wall when you get home. And then we'll start it on Monday and we'll do it for 16 weeks and we'll try as hard as we can and we'll get your nutrition dialed in and we'll make this the most fun, empowering, driven experience that you could possibly have. And you're going to feel fantastic." And then I guess when he's done with that, I'll put him on a new program. Hopefully Mass 3 will be out. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, is the Mass 1 and Mass 2 programs are very good programs once you get up to like a phase 3 to like basically put your body through an experience, physiological limits and then pushing past them.
It's great. You think of even someone who's dealing with some type of orthopedic injury. What does the 30-30 protocol do? Well, it's not all that different from tempo or statodynamic work because you're going to get that occlusive effect and you're not going to be loading your joint as much as you otherwise would have, and you're still going to be getting a hypertrophy response from the byproducts that are accumulating in these muscles. So it's honestly like I use it with a number of people, or if I don't use it specifically, I use principles that I've learned from that science that Pat has exposed me to, and it's helped with so many of my clients. So a lot of patients, I'll write for their goal. Let's get them to some type of 30-30, or let's get them to some type of circuit training so that they understand that they can get themselves out of pain when they use their analytical mind to figure out what's going on in their body. And they can shut off that analytical mind and just work hard, and they realize that it doesn't destroy them. This is the person that can handle anything. And that's really what we want.
Yeah. So you don't want the person thinking one bit, just I have 10 seconds left of rest and then we're hitting it hard.
I want them to understand that they can do both. I want them to know that they can put themselves through stress and then use ideas that they've learned with me to take themselves out of stress. And then they'll be able to encounter any situation that life throws at them, meaning they can go off the rails a little bit. Some of the rigors of life can happen and they won't freak out and go back to all of the PRI breathing exercises that they need to feel good. They'll just be able to internalize what's happening to them and carry on.
Yeah, and that's where we want like everyone to be, ideally as coaches.
I wish I was there.
I know. It's like a struggle. And we're gonna be wrapping up soon, but I want to kind of dive into, being a physical therapist and a coach. What are avenues of education and routes that you would offer to young up and coming kids in school that want to go physical therapy route, or physical therapists that just want to better themselves, more within the lines of what's coming out nowadays as research and stuff? What kind of education and lines of that have you been exposed to and would recommend?
Yeah, and the opportunities for this are are definitely really good in the last couple of years, as truthfully, like being a continuing education person on social media has represented itself as a additional revenue stream avenue, which honestly has been good for those people that are good at it, and has been good for the people that are looking for continuing education. So on the physical therapy side of things, probably the number one resource would be Zach Couples' website. He goes into really in-depth explanations about all of the courses that he's been to. He offers links to different studies and material that he's read. And he just does a thorough job of explaining what it's like to be the person that's trying to learn all these things. And he helps you organize how to do that. So I would definitely recommend Zach. I know Michelle Bowen and Kyle Dobbs, amongst others, just came out with this. I think it's the roadmap to something or other. It's a PDF that's free on her website if you register. It has like a full in-depth roadmap of all these different topics and how to organize your continuing education on them. And actually, to go back to Zach for a second, I just remembered, I think one of the most valuable things that I kind of read and understood on his website was how he organizes different chunks of topics that he's going through at a certain time. I forget what the article is called, but it basically is like his note card system, and then he'll look for research on a topic, and then he'll look for textbooks on the same topic, and then he'll listen to podcasts, and then he'll call his mentors. So it was really in depth. I really liked it. And if you have any kinds of questions on that process, you go to his site, check out the things that he's written. You'll likely have a lot more answers and a lot less questions, but probably also a lot more questions, which is fine. So those two definitely come to mind. I mean, having a mentor is probably second to none as one of the most helpful things you can do. I'm working on getting a student at my clinic. I think we're going to have strength conditioning interns hopefully in the next year or so. So that's definitely a great way to do that. And then just overall being curious, looking for what's around you. There's plenty of opportunity if you go looking for it. So there should be no shortage. You can always go to my social media pages. There's tons of good physical therapists that have pages out there. It's a lot easier to find than it once was, which is great.
Yeah, there's so much out there now. And where can people find you on social media, internet?
No website. Yeah. I wish I had a website. I'd like to say I'm working on it, but I haven't really worked on it all that much. My Instagram page is probably the best. I think it's Mike Demille, DPT, no spaces. We have a pure performance training website. We have a blog where you can see more things about me. I have that presentation that I just finished and came out with, and there's probably going to be more to come soon. So stay tuned with that.
Awesome. Well, Mike, it was great having you on. Definitely want to bring you back for more stuff, more information once we kind of dive more into stuff. But I want to thank you for coming on and taking your time today and explaining a lot of this stuff.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And for anyone out there listening, um, click subscribe on iTunes to the Think Fitness Life podcast. And again, you can find Mike on the Pure Performance website. Check out his Instagram. If you want to contact him, his email should be on the website at Pure Performance. Great guy. Look for his advice if you need for coaching, conditioning, or even rehab. I'd highly recommend it if you're in the state of Massachusetts. And that's all we have for tonight. We will see you next time.